have been asking me about my deck build. Um, Decided I'll put a YouTube video up and tell them to go there so they can get a better description of how I build my deck. And with me today is my little dog Loki, who decided to be a pain in the ass this morning. So let's just start it off then, shall we? Also, I'm sorry about the audio. I'm recording from my iPhone, so it may not be the best quality, but I will try to make do with it, and sorry about the lighting. Anyways, I have a blue-white human angel arrest deck is what I call it, due to the fact that I'm actually using a couple of cards from the new Return to Ravnica Azorius Advance prefab deck, which actually comes really in handy for standard play. You may know that I do have Gideon Jura, who is not standard, so he does not actually go in the deck when I'm actually playing standard tournaments, which is, to be honest, on rare occasions. So I will start off with my actual mana pool. Again, it is islands and plains, but I also put in 2 Azorius Guild Gates, which brought my mana count up to 22. I don't necessarily suggest that for a lot of people. I just like having them in there, so if the game gets a little bit later, which it shouldn't, which I will explain later why, the game should not take too long if you're building this kind of a deck. It's always nice to have dual lands, but there's 10 islands and 10 plains. I like keeping my stuff even. I know a lot of people don't, mainly because of whatever color they're mainly running is how much mana they actually put in. But I like keeping everything even for the sake of an argument, I guess. I'm going to move over to my sideboard real quick. You'll notice, sorry again, I have everything kind of plastered out to which ones are creatures and which ones are spells. Top row are creatures, which I have Captain of the Watch, Crusader Odric ×2, Sphinx of the Chimes, Asperia Skywatch, Leia of Skywatch, Emancipation Angel, and a Sarah Avenger. They're a little bit more high cost than what my deck actually requires to run. They are just for kind of if I decide that I need to put one of these in to make my deck a little bit more of a threat, depending on my first or second game. I usually add them in. On the bottom, I have Moonsilver Spear, Rest in Peace, Parcelan, Inaction Injunction ×2, and 2 Smite the Monstresses, which are actually pretty handy, considering on what kind of deck you're going up against. Loki, will you please back off, bud? Sorry, my dog loves sniffing everything. You'll probably hear me yell at him a couple of times. As in, hey, don't chew on that. Loki, don't chew on that. These are, again, just if I decide that I actually need them, depending on what deck I'm running up against. The Inaction Injunction are always good to have, for the simple fact is that they detain for 2, which I know people tell me that Oblivion Ring is so much better, and I agree, but I've never really ran Oblivion Ring in any of my decks, so again, I don't have it in this deck. I wish I did, because I could actually replace what few spells I have. Okay, so speaking of spells, I'll go directly to that. I have right now in the actual deck itself, I have Increasing Devotion, Cathar's Crusade, one of the Smite the Monstresses, Arrest, 2 Negates, and 1 Dissipate. Yeah, my deck isn't really all that spell heavy, due to the fact that I don't ever expect the game to last long enough for me to have to counter people's spells. This is mainly a speed deck, though I do have these in there, again, just in case. Increasing Devotion is a nifty little card if I'm trying to build a token deck in, let's say, a multiplayer game where there's more than 2 people 2 or 3 people besides myself. Usually have 2 of these in there. In that case, I will probably replace Gideon Jura with another Increasing Devotion, which is a little odd, but once I explain how my deck works, it might make a little more sense. Cathar's Crusade, again, is mainly for multiplayer battles. I don't ever actually expect to get that in a standard, and I never do. Smite the Monstrous, Rest, Negate, and Dissipate are cards that are more likely to come out in the middle of a standard match, which is really handy if you're going against a deck that either uses a lot of spells or builds creatures pretty quickly. The reason why I don't have the other 2 Smite the Monstrous in my deck is because of one of the actual creatures I use does the same exact effect, and he costs less to bring out anyways. Hopefully when I can get 2 more of them, I will replace the Smite the Monstrous with the other 2, and then it will actually be a lot faster and easier to use. Okay, for artifacts, I only have 3. One of them is kind of a new addition, and that would be the Chalice of Life, which is a flip card that goes to the Chalice of Death. I never really expect to gain life. I just have it in there for the threat. I'd rather have someone waste a destroy spell on this than on one of my other more important artifacts that I actually end up using a lot. If you don't know what the Chalice of Life and Death does, Chalice of Life gains you 1 life every time you tap it. Once you go past 10, you flip it over. Chalice of Death, every time you tap it, target opponent loses 5 life. It's quite nasty to have. Then I have the Mask of Avacyn, which target creature gets +1/+2 and has hexproof, which is nifty, but it is in the end kind of expensive. I mean, it costs 2 to bring out, and then it costs 3, which I think is a little overboard. It should only cost 1, in my opinion, but I'm not the person to make these cards, so it's in there on the rare chance that I actually get to use it, which I have been able to a couple of times. And then Elixir of Immortality, which I think every deck should have at least 1 of, mainly because the main reason for it is just because you could actually shuffle your graveyard into your library, which if you go against mill decks, this is a beautiful card to have against mill decks. And with the average standard game I've run into, I at least play 2 or 3 people who are running mill or running control, so this is the best defense, I think, against that. Okay, so now going on to creatures. I guess I'll start off with the newest addition to this deck, and that is Gideon Jura. As far as Planeswalkers go, I don't really like running them, but this is one guy who actually seems to work well in my kind of deck. He's relatively cheap. I mean, for 5, he's not all that expensive. I know there are cheaper Planeswalkers out there, and his effects are pretty much kind of make him a gigantic target. But for his +2 effect, every creature during the target's opponent next turn, creatures that player controls attack Gideon Jura if able. So he's like pretty much completely aggro on him. His -2 is destroy target tapped creature, which is kind of a douchebag move in my opinion, because especially if you make everyone attack him, and if he somehow manages to survive people attacking him, then you could really just say, well, you know, there goes my -2, or there goes my +2, and that creature's gone, which is kind of helpful. The last one, his 0 effect, oddly enough, is he becomes a 6/6 human soldier creature that's still a Planeswalker, and you get to prevent all damage that would be dealt to him, which I think is pretty nifty, because it's pretty much like he has Indestructible on him. So, again, he's not standard, so don't expect to be able to use him in any standard tournament. This is just for the games that I play with my buddies, I guess, that aren't standard. But if when I'm playing standard, I will usually replace him out with the Captain of the Watch, because she helps my deck a little bit more than he does for standard. Now I want to start off with my high cost and work all the way down. I have the Archon of the Triumvirate. Can never freaking say that. He's expensive for the fact that he costs 7. This is also one of the cards from the new Return to Ravnica. If you can't see that, I know my quality is a little crappy. Anyways, he's flying 4/5, kind of a beefcake, but his effect is what really counts. Whenever he attacks, you get to detain 2 target creatures, which basically, it doesn't matter if they have flying or not. You detain his 2 flying guys and then hit him for 4, or whatever else you're attacking with at the time. So it's quite nice to have the ability to basically remove everyone. Loki, out of the way. Next up, I have my 2 Heralds of War, which just were a godsend to actually find. I didn't even know about these cards, but they're quite beautiful for the simple fact that, yes, they do cost 5, so they are expensive for a speed deck, and I don't ever really expect to get them out. But whenever Herald of War attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and for every one of those counters, human and angel spells cost 1 less. So she can be useful, but she's basically in there just for that, again, threat value of if she gets out, they're going to focus on her instead. I don't know why people focus on her. I wouldn't, personally, but people do. Then you have the Azorius Justicar. Again, he costs 4. He's a 2/2 creature, and he gets to detain 2 target creatures as soon as he comes out, which is nice, especially if you already have creatures out. Elder Cathar is the next one up. He is one of the lower cost ones, and he is a common. But the reason why I put him in there is for the fact that I usually end up sacrificing him, to be honest. When someone attacks me with the big creature, I just throw him out to the flames for his effect. And that's when he dies, I get to put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature I control. If it's a human, which is the majority of my deck, it gets 2 of those counters instead. So use him to beef up other creatures, which is always nice. Then I have Precinct Captain, which basically just gets me tokens. If I can actually end up hitting him, or using him to hit an actual player, but with a couple of combos that I use, that's really all not that hard, but never expect him to get out until, if I can, I put him out second turn before anybody else can put creatures out, so I can start spamming that